Шановні колеги,
Esteemed colleagues, UCMC welcomes you in our press center today. We have a discussion dedicated to a very interesting topic, whether the world became safer after the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine, and this discussion is dedicated to the 21st anniversary of since Ukraine joined Non-Proliferation Treaty on November 3 in 1994. Ukraine signed this treaty where it's actually abandoned its nuclear arsenal, which was third largest in the world in those days. And we are going to discuss this issue with the immediate or direct participants in those treaties in the 1990s regarding the Ukraine's renouncing the nuclear weapons, and also the experts who can offer their comments regarding the consequences for Ukraine of this decision, because the story is very interesting. Even more interesting are the consequences of that decision and what we can say about what happened to Ukraine after that. So it's my pleasure to introduce participants of the discussion. Iuriy Kostenko, Director of Ukraine's delegation to negotiations with the Russian Federation on nuclear disarmament in 1992-93, the head of the MP group regarding the ratification by the Verkhovna Rada of the START 1 treaty, and also the Minister of Environment, so Minister of Ukraine, and participant in those treaty. Colonel General Volodymyr Tolubko, Doctor of Engineering, Professor, is 1988-96 commander of the one of the division. He is actually the follower of this disarmament. He is author of the draft document of Ukraine, which made provision for the nuclear shield. Also, Volodymyr Ohryzko, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine 2007 through 2009. The extraordinary plenipotentiary ambassador of Ukraine, ambassador for the special missions, and a lot of other diplomatic titles and ranks. We are still waiting for the head of Presidential Administration Department for Humanitarian Policy and Director of the National Institute for Strategic Research, Mr. Iuriy Ruban, who is going to join us in a minute now. So I would like to ask Mr. Kostenko to tell us 21 years after, so to say, how do you visualize the decision taken by Ukraine regarding the renouncing its nuclear status? Thank you. Esteemed journalists, dear journalists, thank you very much for the opportunity given to us to communicate with you. I would like to thank the organizers of this meeting, and I would like, in my message of introduction, actually, Iuriy Ruban is actually joining us now. Iuriy, we are waiting for you here on this podium. I would like to start our talk. Mention two dates. One date already expired. This year we marked 25 years since the date when in the political vocabulary we had such term as nuclear-free status of Ukraine. This was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on July 16, 1990, and during the discussion regarding the declaration of the national independence of Ukraine. Next year, we are going to conventional, so to say, conditionally celebrate the jubilee, 20 years since the date when Ukraine eliminated the last nuclear warhead. And this happened on July 1, 1996. The major argument, if you're talking about the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine, its history, which was used specifically by the two largest nuclear states, Russia and the United States, as well as other nuclear countries, and not only, also non-nuclear European countries, is the following. Ukraine must actually carry out nuclear disarmament in order not to block the process, the global process of let's say, reducing the nuclear threat the world over and its stability, hence its stability. This thesis was a major argument at different level, discussion of different levels, both in the Verkhovna Rada, also with the involvement of the President of Ukraine, and beyond the boundaries of our country. On the whole, the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine, this topic actually, a special book was published and dedicated to this topic. It was published this year. It went off the print this year, and it's exclusively based on the decisions taken along these lines by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, by the President of Ukraine, the Defense Council, and later the National Defense and Security Council, and based on the results of the negotiations which Ukraine was involved in with Russia and the United States regarding the nuclear disarmament. These books actually contains all the stages of nuclear disarmament, and also it contains the analysis and the, let's say, the conclusions what Ukraine actually acquired, or the world acquired after Ukraine renounced its nuclear, got rid of the nuclear potentiality. This process of depriving the state of its own, the most powerful weapon which guarantees the territorial integrity and independence, this was the first ever in the history of humankind. Just for the sake of comparison, which is actually very graphical. There has been and still is the country which is called the South African Republic. They also had their own nuclear program. They produce 6 nuclear warheads in order to protect them against communist threat. And when the Soviet Union started to disintegrate, that country actually declared the program of nuclear disarmament and elimination of those nuclear warheads. To eliminate those 6 warheads, they spent 2 years time-wise. Ukraine eliminated over 5,000 nuclear charges of tactical and strategic weapons over the period of 4 years, plus 5-6 months. As regards other aspects of nuclear disarmament, while in 1992-1994, the budget of Ukraine was approximately equivalent to $6 billion, Ukraine spent, according to different estimates, spent also the same figure, $6 billion. Ukraine, unlike Belarus and Kazakhstan, which also had nuclear weapons, but which actually they actually conceded those weapons in exchange of guarantee of their security, and they formed the bloc formed by the Russia. They also obtained some material or the monetary compensation, in the form of many-year dotation from the Russian budget, and the money was channeled to the development of the economy of Belarus and Kazakhstan in the form of, let's say, the discounts for natural gas and oil. Ukraine mostly received the technical assistance to the tune of approximately $350 million from the West, and also the compensation for the exported nuclear materials like radium and plutonium in the form of the heat assemblies, the fuel assemblies, which continued for 2 years, and Russia spent no more than $1 billion, but actually Ukraine sent to Russia the nuclear materials to the tune of $100 billion. But the major factor in the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine became the fact that when we abandoned most powerful kind of our armed forces, I'm talking about the weapons which guaranteed our security, we haven't done anything just to compensate for that. As a result, in 1991-1994, the Ukrainian armed forces were number 1 here in terms of the military power and military capability on the European continent. I'm not talking about Russia, because Russia, is a kind of European Asian country. However, when the Russian aggression against Ukraine started in 2014, you know that Ukraine suffered the absolute defeat, and the guarantees of security on paper did not work. We mentioned in those days that anything can be committed to paper, but this was not the legally binding document. I'm talking about the Budapest Memorandum. In the absence of the mechanism to provide assistance to Ukraine in case any kind of aggression is going to be unleashed against Ukraine. And again, the Ukraine lives through the turbulent time when after the Russian aggression. But you know that not only the Budapest guarantee did not work, it did not guarantee our military security. Or the Budapest Memorandum is not instrumental even in guaranteeing gathering of the country's guarantors of our security and to have a discussion with them. The conclusion. We can definitely say that in the process of nuclear disarmament to Ukraine, not only Ukraine was nuclear-wise devastated. I'm talking about the political, economic aspects. Ukraine became in this process became the third world country, which shows of no interest to anybody in the world. This is the most terrible result of this process. And the last thing, whether the world became safer as a result of the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine. As recently was mentioned by the ex-Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Rasmussen, never before the world over we did not experience such a big nuclear war threat as now. Unlike the US former USSR, Ukraine became today absolutely unpredictable. Russia became absolutely unpredictable in terms of use and application of nuclear weapons. Moreover, it uses its nuclear potentiality in order to ensure its own geopolitical interests, and that refers not only to Ukraine but to Syria and all the other countries of the world. That's why nuclear disarmament to Ukraine and the elimination of the third world largest nuclear potential, though physical it was not the elimination, but it was kind of let's say rendering these nuclear weapons sent into our neighbor Russia, and the world over they call it the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine. But the world not only it didn't become safer as a result of that action. Today in the world there are two worlds, the wars at least, one in the center of Europe and another in the center of the Muslim world in Syria. I'm talking about Idil, because it's not only Syria but other states also involved in this warfare. And all those conflicts can develop into the Third World War. As for the other aspect of the nuclear disarmament to Ukraine, the worst consequence of that was the violation of the strategic balance which existed between the USSR and the United States for many years or many decades even, which guaranteed to the post-war Europe, I'm talking about the post-Second World War, guaranteed some peace. Today, by all means, the most powerful nuclear power is the United States, and actually the world from the bipolar became the unipolar, but the United States on their own cannot and are not capable to ensure the security in all the countries of the world. That's why we can see a very weak response on the part of the USA regarding the events in Ukraine or in Syria, to that matter. So the conclusion is, if we are talking about nuclear disarmament to Ukraine, until they do not create in the world a new concept of security, until then the world will strive to acquire nuclear weapons and, if need be, apply this or use this kind of weapons, and the major stimuli for such policy of all the rest of the world countries of the history of the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Kostenko. Already touched upon the issue of the status of Ukrainian army. I would like to address Mr. Tolubko. To us, or the people who are not very much aware about this, it's obvious that the armed forces with nuclear weapons and without that are different armed forces. When we are talking today about the status of the armed forces of Ukraine, can you try and analyze what could be the situation with Ukraine, if you're talking about status of this country, if it did not take care of the nuclear disarmament, what would be the consequences for the armed forces of Ukraine in this case? Good afternoon. I would like to tell you that I came here in order to support my colleague Iuriy Kostenko and to say, as a professional, military professional, that he is absolutely right. This is number one and the most important why I came here. Actually, what I would like to say, I already said that to our government. To be wise when it's too late can be done by anybody. We have a lot of patriots today who cry at every corner that they really love this country, that they are most dedicated patriots and most loyal patriots also. I'm already retired general. I'm rector of the State Institute of Telecommunications. So, at the entrance of our institute, I actually put the poster, "Love Ukraine with all your heart," and then comma, and with all your deeds and actions. So I address you. In our country, all those who live here and who cry out that they love the country, they have to love the country doing something which are very useful and beneficial to the country, your deeds. I mean, this is the problem. And now answering your question, I would like to say that I'm going to actually to distribute this later. This is the speech of People Deputy Tolubko during the Verkhovna Rada session regarding the nuclear disarmament in 1992, October 1992. 28th of October. Actually, I propose some of these things. Then I mentioned that when we have a powerful army, then we will be guaranteed that we are going to have independent and powerful Ukraine. And what has to be done for that? I'm going to leave this information for you, and I believe that you as professionals, journalists it will be interesting for you to have this information. On 30th November of 1992, after the Verkhovna Rada voted for publication of my article, because in the west of Ukraine they refused to publish that. And they hinted there that there were some kind of, in the medieval history, they didn't have real firearms. They only had some cold weapons like spears or swords, and they were formed different phalanx. So a few things. Number one, Ukraine used to be a nuclear power since 1960. And on territory of Ukraine, we had nuclear weapons. Moreover, Ukraine actually was a producer of the space rocket technology. We did not produce the nuclear warheads, but we were producing the missiles, the rockets for space technology. When we voted for the independence of Ukraine, the independence of all the former USSR republics made provision for the following: whatever is stationed on the territory of this or another country is considered to be the possession or the property of this country. We had some guarantees of all the countries of the world. Actually, in 1996, we completed the elimination of the SS-24 according to the NATO classification. Missile, it had the service life, guaranteed service life 25 years, so you can add to to 1990, 25 years. For another 50 years, we could see, we could have the guarantee of our security for 50 years. So the world over, this is regarded as a guarantee that nobody will dare to encroach upon the territory of the country. Let's say in Korea, they do not have the nuclear potential. It's really ridiculous. But we had the third largest nuclear potential in the world after the United States and Russia. Moreover, each missile could carry 10 warheads, and each warhead was equivalent to 25 Hiroshima or Nagasaki, in its explosive power. In other words, we could be, you know who is respected the world over? The strong and rich. The poor and weak, they do not respect. I'm sorry for my very straightforward speech like a military guy. I absolutely support Iuriy Kostenko, who mentioned that we could do the way he proposed to do, and why we actually agreed to do what we did. I can answer this question. During the meeting of the National Security and Defense Council, I said that the elimination of the nuclear weapons is equal to the high treason, or let's say the betrayal of our own people. And I mentioned that in those days. Can you imagine anybody to say straight in the face of the president something like that? I did. Why do you think that they did not hit you in those days? I have to say that not incidentally I start my speech. Love Ukraine with your heart and your deeds. Unfortunately, they love Ukraine in words but not in deeds, unfortunately. And the same situation was in those days. And nobody knows who served to which country and who serves which country today. This is a big question. Who serves which country, unfortunately. So today we have a highly educated president. This is my opinion, but let's support. We actually elected such a highly educated, intellectual person, intelligent person, progressive person. Then all of us, we have to unite and support him in order to ensure the development of our country. We didn't do anything like that in those days. For this country become strong, and we do not want to do the same today. Anybody wants to do what they want to do, like in those days. And we already mentioned that Iuriy Kostenko, Volodymyr Tolubko mentioned there that this was going to be the first case in the world history when the nuclear power become non-nuclear country. To say nothing about the third largest nuclear potential arsenal the world over. This is another evidence that maybe the MPs in those days were out of their mind, Thank you. We are going to return to that issue. Mr. Ohryzko, we have a question to you as a former ex-minister of Foreign Affairs and a diplomat. How's the situation with the renouncing, let's say, the nuclear disarmament of Ukraine, how they start to perceive Ukraine as a player in the world politics, and would like to hear from you how important that factor was and how the attitude to Ukraine changed after we renounced our nuclear arsenal. Actually, Ukraine could be involved in the negotiations from different positions. And everyone was prepared actually to be involved in negotiations. They were even prepared to accept Ukraine as a member of the NATO. So what kind of signals they did not heed or ignored? And could we have some parallel with today's situation when Ukraine again is in the screen of the radars of the world attention? Thank you for your questions. I'll try to provide the short answers. Unfortunately, I was not part of those negotiations. I worked in those days in Germany, and in those days we opened our bilateral representative office. And that's why, to my much regret, maybe those present here, they were witnesses of what was happening in Kiev in those years or days. You're talking about some parallel situations, the same here. In those days, we are under the great pressure. The same pressure is exerted today. Why? Because the country was weak in those days and today as well. Because if you're talking about the country which holds the economy in their arms, nobody will have kind of kind of paternal attitude, because this country deserves some respect. In the beginning of the 1990s, you remember Ukraine inflation rate 1,000%, economic ruination in all the aspects, and the nuclear weapons issue. I talked to many of our members of the top echelon of powers. And one of the military guys told me that we could not actually maintain or provide maintenance of or upkeep our nuclear arsenal. I cannot neither, let's say, support this point of view or reject it, because I'm not an expert in the military issues, the more so in the nuclear technologies. But that was an official position. We cannot possibly provide maintenance for the strategic nuclear missiles. Maybe Volodymyr Tolubko will explain whether this is true or not, but I heard that with my own ears from the highest officials in those days. Well, coming back to our today's situation, dear friends, in fact, it so happens that the system of international global security does not function. It does not exist. It somehow has been dissolved in the space. There is no normal system of guarantees for different countries, whether they are nuclear powers or non-nuclear ones. This again started to switch over to the plane of political fantasies. Iuriy Kostenko asked whether we are going to create this system. No, because the strong system is based on the common values, and we do not have common values in today's world. How can you unite a liberal Europe with a deal? They do not have common values. Are there any common values between emancipated women in Europe and those who wear, who cover their faces in the well-known countries of Central Asia or in the Middle East? No. Those are trifles, but without those common values, any system cannot work. That's why today we do have the United Nations. It's kind of a dream. I believe that the UN system is kind of a dream and the belief of the humankind in their bright future. But because under this roof, very correct and nice, there is a power. And I agree with Mr. Tolubko. The more country is powerful, the more respected it is. The other question, what kind of power we're talking about, political or economic, or a possibility to actually brainwash anybody in the world, or the influence of the minds of the world. But and this is the issue of the reality. What way we can actually ensure our power or strength in the international arena? There is a purely military way or non-military. In the purely military one, there is a nuclear component and production of the high precision regular weapons. And I talked with many Americans on the highest level, and quite recently, they do not recommend us to return to the to restore nuclear status. Why? Well, it's clear, because this will mean non-nuclear explosion in the politics of the world over. That would mean that Ukraine, though it's renounced its nuclear weapons, will take a step towards the system of whatever else we have today. On the other hand, which is also important, Ukraine has all the potentialities and potentials to restore, from technological point of view, its nuclear status. Even after Mr. Yanukovych actually gave away our nuclear uranium, actually we stopped to be members of this specific community, and actually have the clear information regarding that. Ukrainian scientists can restore or innovate the manufacture of the nuclear fission materials. I mean nuclear materials which can be used for the creation of nuclear weapons. Actually, if we're talking about high precision ordinary weapons, we're talking about its parameters, is no inferior to the nuclear weapons. So to take risk and to somehow to undermine the general system, or to place an emphasis on something different. Honestly speaking, at the first stage, I publicly spoke in favor of restoration of the nuclear status. I do not say no to that idea, but then we have to think about the price of that issue. What would be the cost of that? Let's say alternative A and B, plan A and plan B. This arithmetics, we have to take into consideration political, economic, financial aspects, etc. So there are at least two possible alternatives. Speaking about the second one, economic one, until Ukraine has a firm foothold as the normal economic power, there are no chances to restore the nuclear weapons or for the production of the high-tech or high-precision weapons, because if the economy doesn't work, nothing works. And now the question is whether we would wish, we, in broad sense of that word, the society and the authorities, they would like to bring everything to order here. We are going to combat corruption. We would like to introduce the equal rights in the society. If not, we are going to follow the closed loop, the closed circle. So our security is in our hands. And I really understand that we have to prove with our deeds whether we wish our country to be powerful both in political and economic aspects. Thank you. But can we talk about some lessons learned by Ukrainian diplomacy? We are talking about the history of negotiations regarding nuclear weapons, which could be used today when the diplomats have to defend our national interests. The diplomacy is only the consequence. This is not the major reason, and not the cause. It's rather the effect. If everybody understands that this is only the screen, nobody is going to do that. The tolerant times are over. Well, sad to hear that, but anyway. Now we would like to hear, Mr. Ruban, your opinion regarding what was mentioned by other participants in our press conference. We mentioned that Mr. Tolubko asked who says to which country. So I would like to talk with you about the issues of national security, national interests, and the statehood in the political in general, on the whole. It's understood that when the United States exerted pressure operation in Ukraine to eliminate the nuclear weapons, just pursuing their national interests, they were mistaken in assessing the response of Russia or their point of view on that. But it's not clear where the national interests of Ukraine lie in this story. For example, over the last year, the Verkhovna Rada adopted some kind of controversial decisions. There was no doctrine or some kind of plans for national security. Is the situation different today? If there is some kind of this, the governmental or the state level, national level, point of view regarding this issue, regarding the national security? Thank you for your questions. You have a bunch of questions now. So I'll try to answer one by one. And sorry if I failed to answer some of those. So what actually catches my eye in all our talks? Definitely, it's very important that there is a book which has been published, where chronological manner we have all the they reflects all the facts regarding the discussion, passing the decision on nuclear disarmament of Ukraine. This is a big deal. Perhaps we underestimate that. We are so much used to live in our information space. Dear journalists, very often the effects substituted, or I mean, replaced by some personal opinion, and then some personal opinion beats another personal opinion, and they say goodbye to some factual or actual basis. And you can please add the well-known media law, which consists of two parts. If you want to become popular, you have to have primitive, and there must be drama as well.
So there should be a fight among good and bad, and where the decision is taken, and then you will get some sort of a salad that continues to exist in this difficult situation of taking difficult decisions and about the establishing of the nuclear-free status of Ukraine. And of course, we all hope for the miracle. Starting from our childhood, we believe in miracles. And the idea is that there's some magic potion that will allow to solve all problems in one moment. And when I read about nuclear status of Ukraine, I see that their authors share belief that we shouldn't do anything, and taking care of economy and politics, that we had a magic wand that we lost. Let's just renew it. And seriously, I heard, and now there are some deputies that they say that it's easy to renew the status in 1 or 2 years. In my previous life, I worked as an engineer at university. It was in the 80s. Of course, there were state secrets, and it happened so that I knew some information about the submarine and the missiles that it carried, and in order to produce these submarines, there was a very strong state, and this state failed because they were not able to continue to do this. This resource was paralyzed, and it paralyzed all other sectors of economy. And when we are speaking about Ukrainian economy, when they say to you that it's easy to restore the nuclear status, ladies and gentlemen, what should be done to renew the status? If you say scientific potential, of course. If you believe that our National Academy of Sciences is able to provide research and design work and development and maintenance and establishing all the process, if you believe in this, and I just envy you, your optimism. Of course, if you address any of Ukrainian experts, directors of institutes, and you ask whether they want to restore nuclear status, they will come with the packages of contracts for billions of dollars. And of course, they will try to do something about it because they work there in that sphere. And of course, they will write these contracts, and they will swear to you that what they did before, that their projects are better than in the United States. Then our economy. I don't want to look just what our GDP is now. I want to understand from what sector, how would you mobilize those billions of dollars? Where do they come from to use this money for the development of nuclear weapons? I'm interested in such a discussion because if there is an idea and it is detached from the content, it shines brightly. But the issue is that if we only have this idea and it doesn't and it is not connected with reality, so we are a poor state. And if we are ready to go into this direction and to then become developed, and that the international community, for example, will be able to provide us with the status that we can get the status. It should be politically. There should be a consolidation of society. Our policy should be well forecast, and if, for example, say we go to NATO and then the next president says that we go to Russia, if you think that that it looks good, imagine that these people want to get the access to nuclear weapons. Of course, it's frightening. And I'm sorry, but I didn't hear in the 90s that we were invited to NATO. Maybe I missed something, but I'm not sure that now in 2015, I'm not sure that American Senate would vote that in case if, for example, there's aggression, that they will be ready to send troops to Ukraine in order to die for this country. And I don't think that it would the situation was in the 90s. So weapons, military power, these are projections of political consolidation and projection of economic power of the country. If we are ready to go this way to the political consolidation, to responsibility in politics and economic development, and that our state can accumulate the resources that provided by our economy and distribute them to some projects, and one of those projects will be a secret project, and no one knows about it, and there will be a set of experts. And I think that like in 40s, the technology would go faster, and if we are ready, that we will having such a laboratory, and that the next day they won't publish all these documents in the paper, then if we reach this, of course, after this, it will be possible to speak with us about such important issues. But our main focus should be our eastern borders, so we should repair our tanks. So you know the story about the Donetsk airport. From 5 tanks, they only were able to start much less. So we should first solve much simpler issues. For example, we had 250,000. We should have 20,000 or 25,000 of well-trained servicemen who have new arms, and not only according to the Israel license. Let's produce Ukrainian artillery, and because we have old systems, our system of so if we have old artillery systems, we should renew them, and then step by step we should go further and look what will happen next.
As regards NATO, maybe Mr. Kostenko can offer his comments, because he touched upon that issue in his book. I believe that the strong economy concept became prevalent during this discussion in order to talk about some potential decisions under the circumstances and everybody agrees we have to talk about the strong and powerful economy. So my question to Mr. Kostenko, were there any alternatives regarding that situation where Ukraine found itself like a Cinderella? Actually, Ukraine started to extend its asking for alms. Is there any chance for Ukraine to get out of this situation, find a way out of the situation? Regarding the invitation to join NATO, that was on official level done on December 1990, when during his talk with Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Mr. Belarus, he hasn't shared this information with the top echelon powers in Ukraine, and he was talking with the State Department, and he said that no nuclear weapons can protect you from the Russian aggression. That the best way to safeguard your national interests and the territorial integrity is actually joining the system of collective European security, in other words, NATO. But no steps in the period 1990 to 94 towards NATO were taken neither by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MFA, nor the President, nor the government. They did not take any steps toward that, and this was kind of suspended, as we say, suspended in the air. As for our other steps, towards the best nuclear disarmament, perhaps the best way could be a membership in NATO in the beginning of 1990s, but in those days the top echelons of power in Ukraine, the parliamentary majority, which was the communist one with the communist mentality, in the year regarding NATO, the enemy number one of the USSR. So politics-wise, that was something which could not be realized. But there were some other options proposed by the United States, broad cooperation between Ukraine and USA, both along the lines of the nuclear disarmament and elimination of the nuclear weapons and not giving it back to Russia, and also the gradual formation of the strategic partnership between the United States and Ukraine. Those two factors could, in most cases, help Ukraine in that very difficult time. Yes, economic ruination, the lack of the finances in the economy, lack of the experience in this statehood construction, maybe that was problem number one in those days. The lack of understanding was the national interest. Those were the most serious enemies in our life. As for the proposal from the United States to establish or set the joint venture for the dismantlement of the nuclear weapons and the nuclear charges, and then reprocessing of those nuclear materials into the non-nuclear ones, and using the high enriched plutonium mechanism of collateral. And this actual option was most economically beneficial to Ukraine, because as a result, Ukraine actually gave away its plutonium, almost 100 tons, free of charge to Russia. And also it is the gradual increase of all the aspects of our cooperation with the United States of America. When back in 1993, in September of that year, our parliamentary delegation went to Washington, headed by the deputy chairman of Commission for Foreign Affairs, Bogdan Goran. The meetings they had at the level of the Department of State, in other words, MFA of the United States, the National Security and Defense Council of the United States, at the level of other, Pentagon, the other Minister of Defense. They actually testified to the fact that in those days Americans were prepared to help Ukraine to become separated from Russia, and they did not actually hide the fact that the biggest threat to Ukraine was too much integration of the economy or the military interests into the Russian interests. That's why distanciation from Russia, which could be ensured in those days by the United States of America, were the best way for nuclear disarmament and the best guarantee of our subsequent security and safety. Thank you. Mr. Ohryzko, you wanted to offer a comment. Yes, just a short remark. Today we can put the ashes on our heads and say that we did not do properly that, and I believe our first mistake in this case, no, not only us, but all the CIS countries which gathered in 1992 in Almaty, they allowed Russia to continue to pursue the same line of pursued by the USSR in the to represent the Security Council of the United States, United Nations, generally speaking, and to continue to be the nuclear power. And this was actually the beginning of those problems. And as we say, we can be very wise casting our mental eye into the past, but during our negotiations with our partners, etc., etc. But anyway, I believe that I was actually stuck to the opinion that despite our very modest opportunities, we could pursue more active policy. And I agree with Iuriy that we have to think about the rifles and the entire tank guided missiles and the other, well, let's say anti-aircraft guns and something other kinds of weapons which are not we're still lacking in the front line today. But we should also think about our future. Yes, that future is not an easy one, but it could be realistic if at last Ukrainian economy starts to work efficiently, whether we are capable of, if we can take care of some changes in the top level, then we stand a chance. And actually, this will take not decades. Those things can be done much faster. Thank you very much. Now some questions and answer sessions. Are there any questions from the part of the journalists? Please, you're welcome. And while you're thinking about the question, I have a question addressed to all the participants in our discussion. It's obvious the situation Ukraine is living through today demonstrates the absolute incapability, or let's say, impotence of the international approach. We are talking about the Budapest Memorandum and what those memorandums are worth. We can see for the second year now, but there are no other alternative to that. Nobody invented something better. But this became a very good example. I mean, a great example for the a couple of dozens of countries which are involved in the efforts to create the nuclear capability. In fact, this actually questions the reality, because let's say the world became even less secure than when Ukraine renounced its nuclear capability. Well, I would like to say maybe our colleagues didn't hear what we mentioned with Ms. Kostenko. We didn't mean that we have to restore nuclear weapons in this country. We were talking that we used to be a nuclear power. In fact, nuclear power was the third largest nuclear potential in the world. Me being a professional, because actually I served in the nuclear missile forces, I would like to say let's say the upkeep of the nuclear weapons in Ukraine was only 7% of all the money spent for the whole armed forces. 7% only. Another example: the use of the high precision weapons, and Mr. Ohryzko aptly said that they can be compared with the nuclear one. In Iraq, they used only 7% of high precision weapons, but they actually fulfilled 90% of the missions using those. One more thing, maybe not never, it's not correct to say that, but in our lifespan, but in your lifespan, and the lifespan of our children and grandchildren, And we will be blessed if we can restore the nuclear power in Ukraine. But we could leave that in our country, and we had every conditions, terms and conditions to for that weapon to remain in this country, and we had all the possibilities, opportunities, whatever else. Sorry, I'm going to this not very good word. Let's say the blah blah men, as we call them. And I really like this kind of thought you expressed, that there are facts and there is an idea about facts. So they live through the ideas of the facts. I know the facts because I took care of the nuclear power upkeep. Actually, silicon to replace, this is not a maintenance, this is kind of, ridiculous, if you're talking about the replacing of lubricants and the warheads. I realistically took care of that. We did not actually tell it to each other what we are doing, because that was a high secret situation. We used to produce a lot of weapons, which was competitive with the World War. Speaking of the Verkhovna Rada, I proposed to sell the weapons and the arms. That was the most profitable kind of trade, the arms, and we were competitive. And in this case, we could become the economical strong power of the country, and because the economically strong country can actually take care of a normal life for decent life of the people, and this kind of weapons was required in order to ensure our independence and our existence, so that nobody could encroach upon our territory, say this is mine, this is also mine, and this is mine. And but I would like to say that when Ukraine started, that was 10 orders ahead or higher than all the rest of the former USSR republics. Just if you just try to find out, we just look at the economic indices we had as compared to others, and what we gave away and what we tried to persuade. Yeah, they mentioned already that in this country you never know who serves which country, and those who cry out that they love dearly this country, and then how you rob this country, whether this is one of the manifestation of your love to Ukraine. If you take the high precision weapons, yes, this is very efficient. There are space weapons, they are very efficient. Actually, if you're talking about the control devices, control systems for the satellites or the in space, the ship which actually rotates around the Earth, we actually manufacture those control systems, and we're talking about the high precision weapons with the control systems manufactured in Ukraine, which was flying on the altitude 20-25 meters. Yes, I agree absolutely. If we can take care of this kind of weapons, we can do that. Nuclear weapons, no, because you have to be the Soviet Union to do that. Well, how they invested, how much money they invested, not only billion and trillions perhaps, nobody knows that. The whole USSR actually invested money into that capability. But today, if this is something which you can do if you're talking about the high precision weapons. Yeah, this is a complex one. Why? Because because we actually ruined the military industrial complex. We had our own guns, artillery units, which were the most modern in the world, the state of the art. We actually produced and manufactured both the ALC, the armed APCs, and MPCs, the armed personnel vehicle, and armed transportation vehicles, and all other kinds of weapons, slowly but surely. One thing which I would like to say, I always think where the problem lies. We have the wonderful soil, land. We have very hard-working people, the good-natured people. So what's the problem? What's the catch? So we are not lucky with the top echelon of authorities. You understand what I'm talking? If we had somebody who manages properly our country, we would have lived in the blossoming country or the flourishing country. We have to be sure that we should not look for the imperfections or defects, but try to find some positive things, and then to find who is the enemy to who. You understand what I'm talking about? That we are not going to produce nuclear weapons. Actually, if we had the nuclear weapons, sorry to say that they would kiss our asses, excuse me, for saying that, if we had that weapons, let's say the lower part of the back, sorry. Yeah. Nothing can guarantee to such country as us, if we are talking about nuclear powers, any kind of security, none of the international treaties or the agreements, even the membership in NATO cannot guarantee that. You are talking about the situation in the Crimea, we are not talking about some kind of onslaught that was going on. So, what's your opinion? What can actually defend Ukraine today? Whether it's worthwhile to accede to some kind of alliances or the treaties, whatever. I'll start. My colleagues will continue. The world over, the most efficient is, for 70 years now, the principle of the punishment for the attempt to do something detrimental to another country. There were two superpowers the world over which had the biggest nuclear potential. I'm talking about USSR, United States, and behind them there were some kind of state formations. But at the level of this kind of nuclear confrontation between USSR and the USA, the principle of parity did not allow any other country in the world not only to unleash some kind of nuclear war, because there are 5 official nuclear powers which today have nuclear arsenals. So in addition to USSR and the United States, now Russia and the USA, also there are Great Britain, France, and China, and today, also the nuclear weapons is present in Israel, Pakistan, India, and the Northern Korea. It's very difficult to say whether this is already nuclear weapons or just kind of the stage towards creating that. So none of the nuclear powers did not dare to use it because the balance was guaranteed by 2 powers, United States and USSR. When this principle of punishment for, let's say, nuclear strike, and today absolute leader in the nuclear arms race became United States, the world did not have any other paradigm which would ensure stability and security to other countries. Nobody has invented any other paradigm. From this point of view, even the participation of Ukraine in system collective security as part of NATO does not guarantee 100% security to our country or territorial integrity, nor it guarantees it guarantees the security and the national and territorial integrity to Russia, because it became vulnerable to the nuclear threat on the part of the United States, according to the Institutes of the Peace Problem. Back in 2014, it became obvious the United States today already protected themselves against the possible nuclear strike against the United States on the part of Russia and some other countries, for example, China. On the other hand, the United States can deliver a nuclear strike already without the retaliation strike in order to ruin the economy of the country, which actually will lead to its defeat. So question number 1, which emerged after the elimination of nuclear weapon in Ukraine, how to form today the global security system which definitely would guarantee to the world the quietness and peace. Unfortunately, today nobody even is involved in discussion of this issue or this problem. This is the biggest problem, not only for Ukraine, but the whole humankind. The history of the nuclear disarmament taken by Ukraine, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. No conclusion was made by any country, and actually they actually push those countries to restore the nuclear capability and other countries to defend their and protect their frontiers. What was done by Israel, we could see on TV some kind of shootings. It's not the real warfare, but anyway, but they actually protected themselves by the presence of the nuclear weapons in that country against the militant Arab countries, and actually otherwise it will lead to very serious consequences which we can become eyewitnesses in the next period of time. I can agree with everything what was said by Iuriy, but there was one exception. I always was in support and remain in support of the membership of Ukraine in NATO. There is the public organization, Ukraine movement towards NATO, which is headed by the first Ukrainian president, Mr. Kravchuk. We would like to organize the national referendum regarding the accession of Ukraine's accession to NATO. After this Russian aggression in Ukraine against Ukraine, the NATO woke up. Yeah, they were kind of the of liturgy, whatever. Unfortunately, it happened like that. And now they start to wake up, and they now to understand that the global threat comes from the Russian Federation. And if you're talking about the possible onslaught on Estonia under the present circumstances, it's not worthwhile to say that the United States will not respond to that, because this would mean the collapse, or let's say the ruination of the whole NATO-created security system. Though again, dear friends, we're talking about some theoretical or technical things, because everybody understands that the application of the nuclear weapons is a kind of suicidal. This is a kind of intimidation or tool, or containment instrument, using the diplomatic language. And Ruban, I don't think that there will be some politician who is going to press the red button, because this will lead to the elimination, self-ruination. So we're talking about some philosophical aspects, but being part of the global security system, we're speaking about NATO. If Ukraine joins NATO, the Ukraine, this kind will feel itself much more sure, I would say, or assured, and we have to think about that and move toward that. We have another question. I'm not a diplomat, so I allow myself. I actually like your question, because the question was absolutely correct. Why the Baltic states are making the hullabaloo about that, or crying out about that? Why this tension? Why all the countries of the Central and Eastern Europe try to achieve the deployment of the American forces or NATO forces on their territory? A very simple answer to that question. History teaches us that all the guarantees on paper, they exist while it is beneficial to somebody to observe those. Everybody understands if the Ukraine collapses or is defeated, then there will be the fight for example, territory of Poland, and nobody will be within the scope of interest. So anybody, the Putin will start a campaign of the Russian language in his exploration in the Baltic states. Putin, he did not invent the hybrid war, because he is not beneficial to him to move all the tanks or the artillery. Under this situation, there is no guarantee that all the NATO countries will stick to the Article 5 of Washington Treaty. That's why, of course, many countries believe that the only guarantee is the presence of the American troops or forces on their territory. In what sense? If they deliver a strike, and if at least one American soldier is killed, then the American president or the Congress of the United States, even Mr. Obama, the well-known peace maker and the Nobel Prize winner, if a single American soldier dies, he will be forced to use his authority and powers and take care of the guarantees of security. When we are talking about many countries, they just cry out, please station in our country, deploy in our countries as one battalion or one radar station for the Russians to see and realize that on our territory there are American soldiers who are protected by the American nuclear capability. One more question. Volodymyr is going to leave, and actually my question is addressed to you, Mr. Kostenko and Ruban. Very brief answer. Maybe you can give a short answer. Ukraine in the beginning of the 1990s, and today is kind of ecological pie. In those days, as Mr. Kostenko said, that there were some signals sent by the United States to which Ukraine did not respond. What signals are sent today which would be worthwhile to respond? First, one is to become a normal, civilized country, because on this depends the third, 15th, 28th seasons. Until Ukraine becomes a normal European partner, no other terms and conditions can be validated. Until we demonstrate that we want some transformations and changes in this country, we would like to become a normal country, nothing else matters. Today is a really critical phase for our country. Either we cross the border of the post-Soviet or post-Soviet sentiments, and we say goodbye to that and start a normal post-Soviet construction, or they say us openly that you lost your chance. And sorry, I have to leave at this point of time. Thank you very much for your participation. Well, I'm going to continue the uses mentioned by Mr. Ohryzko, that everybody expects of us some kind of reasonable policy based on the modern international principles. And first of all, we are talking about respect the let's say the rule of law. In 1992-94, when we considered the topic of nuclear disarmament of Ukraine, the biggest problem for the Ukrainian parliament was to force the Ukrainian government, which was subordinated, by the way, in those days to the parliament, to speak with the world regarding nuclear disarmament using the language of laws, which on the one hand were adopted by the Verkhovna Rada, on the other hand using the language of international law. What I mean to say, nuclear weapons, this not only we inherited this after the disintegration of the USSR. Nuclear weapons was created by the hands of Ukrainians, and the first nuclear explosive devices were made of the uranium, was what produced here in Ukraine, in Dnipropetrovsk region, in the town of Zhovty Vody. So we realistically participated in the development of the nuclear explosive device, and the treaty, which later we were forced to sign as a non-nuclear state, or non-proliferation treaty I'm talking about, but it mentioned that nuclear powers could be only those countries which until the year 1968 developed and tested the nuclear explosive device. And the same is said by international law. If at the moment of Ukraine's acquisition of its independence was the Black Sea Fleet and all other establishment institutions, that indeed becomes the property of Ukraine, and the discussion that we are not the owners of the nuclear weapons, or we cannot upkeep that or maintain that, those were actually either the opinions of non-professionals or the enemies of Ukraine, because I understand what I'm talking about. Because now Russia still operates SS-24 in NATO classification, and I'm sorry, in 19, it's different modification of nuclear missile, which is called Satan now, but that was the production of the Dnipropetrovsk Yuzhmash and Design Bureau Yuzhna, and then the Russians we had to provide the service on those nuclear charges until we had those nuclear weapons carriers, and even those scary stories that nuclear weapons could explode and we would have another Chernobyl. This is not true because, as Mr. Tolubko said, that the warheads are designed in such a way that it is a non-sanctioned explosion of nuclear device is impossible. And so even if some kind of TNT is going to explode, this will not lead to a nuclear explosion. So we never mentioned through MFA or anybody else that nuclear weapons is the privatization of property of Ukraine until the Verkhovna Rada adopted a new special law which fixed that the nuclear weapons is the property of Ukraine. Today, we have the same situation when Ukraine called aggression on the part of Russia, called some kind of interesting term as ATO, anti-terrorist operation, which actually absolutely rejects all the international rights. Ukraine has the right to the free of charge military assistance and the right to demand retribution from Russia. And for example, our Prime Minister believes that we can get something for the annexion of the Crimea or took our property. We can rely upon all kinds of weapons which the rest of the world can provide to Ukraine as a country which is the victim of aggression. And what Ohryzko mentioned that in the Security Council of UN, Russia did not legally acquire that right because what was signed in Almaty, it was not ratified by the newly emerged countries after the disintegration of USSR. So this is legally invalid. So if Ukraine was approaching the United States in a proper way, the Russia would be ousted from that state Security Council as the country aggressor. And now we are talking about what we had to start with the right to title, to possession of the nuclear weapons and to be an equal negotiator with the rest of the world regarding the terms and conditions of nuclear disarmament today, which is provided by the Statute of United States, what aggression means. Ukraine calls it civil war and receives from the world community not the assistance, at least a kind of the silence consent to this kind of civil war. Thank you. I really appreciate your invitation, and I really hate to say that he's going to be sorry about that. We can argue about this kind of the legal aspects, but I can't remember any document which would call what is going on in the Donbas area a civil war. I am sorry, but I have never seen that. We call it the anti-terrorist operation, ATO. Yeah, we can argue till we lose our voices that if we declare and call it the war, and after this everybody will start to cry and shed tears and will deliver all kinds of arms here, but then we'll start the discussion, whether the world acts according to the laws or to the interests and the balance of powers. Really, it's a shame, but I believe the world acts according to the balance of powers, or balance of interests, and not according to the adopted or accepted laws. What I would like to say, we found ourselves in the situation of the deep crisis, and I'm talking here from the point of view of political science. Political science teaches us that each country, and then this experience is called institutionalized experience of chaos. That means that any country went through some crisis during its state development or statehood construction. So the country either remains on the map or it disappears. Our history said that all political classes, they always robbed the country and they misappropriated the objects and they they were involved in some conspiracies with the neighboring countries, etc., etc. But when in the time of crisis, they managed always to come down or downsize their appetites, and they managed to preserve their countries. In political science, it's called the a military tax operation, whatever. In answer your question, the West, just the master of Ukrainian political class, become the state. In other words, this experience of the crisis experience had to demonstrate to you already that you will have to decrease your appetite is to steal. You have to rob less, and to steal less, you have to pay the taxes, and to be involved in some let's say some other things not to your liking. Otherwise, you will disappear from the map or from the life. Of course, if they voted anew about this, everybody would come back to the year 2013 without Yanukovych, though. This is a very popular idea, but nevertheless, I believe that our partners, they say the following. And here we can actually speak openly about this signal, as Iuriy Ivanovich mentioned. They send us a very powerful signal that, yes, NATO woke up, and every day new opportunities emerge. Some positive policies pursued toward us to some extent, and then some signals demonstrated by the European Union, and some gestures demonstrated by the United States. So what's going on? And after conditional speaking, we have this smaller but chance to say goodbye to the warfare in Donbass, and nobody knows what will happen after the elections. Nobody knows when they will take place. But we can concentrate the intellectual, economic, whatever else resources to take care of the reforms here inside this country, which will actually limit or restrict the appetites of the authorities and make the predictable policy, economic policy included, to find resource for the armed forces to create some kind of our own guarantees of security. Of course, we wish that somebody gives us those guarantees, but at least let's do our part of this effort to have the armed forces which could be reliable. Of course, they won't be able to reach Yekaterinburg, but during the onslaught of the Russians, they can take care of some minimum mission. You remember when the military prosecutor said that when we, September, or the end of August last year, between Ilovaisk and Kiev, we had how much? 139 soldiers. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's actually take care of some small steps to avoid such situations, and then our partners actually could count on us, or kind of the force which could be included in the balance of some other forces. In a few words.
When we finish our discussion, I brought several several speeches of mine, so I want you to take it and read it. I just want to say that this is a position of a state person, and I will read this to you. Those politicians who take care of what they will say about us, and new weapons and nuclear weapons. I would like to answer that it's not important what they are talking about us. It's important only what we can do with them. So there will be some challenges, and that's why we should remember the words of Karamzin. If there's no, there won't be liberty if we won't have our own forces. So if we leave these nuclear weapons, and if we develop our economy, we are all very clever. We just speak a lot, but we should work a lot. I'm sorry. I wouldn't come if I wasn't asked by my friend who is a statesman, and I respect him a lot. If you love you should do things and not just talk. And he does real things. So if everyone worked like he does, everything would be okay. And there won't be 25 years of talking how we are going to build the state. So it's just funny. I'm sorry. But if we did what Iuriy Ivanovich said, you would consider how much money to give to your child for a house or a business, and we would think about positive things. And thank you for your discussion. And I want to thank those people who came here today, and I want to say what Volodymyr Borисovich said in just in another context. We should do, not just talk. I'm accustomed that there are topics in society that attract a lot of people of different professions, age, expertise. And it was till 2010. And now I came here, and I thank you a lot for the possibility to speak with the media. But I saw this neglect. The society is not interested in this topic because and this shows why we are in the state of war now. And this topic gives the recipe what should and shouldn't be done in order to overcome this war. Because you can win or you can lose in the war, so we should be winners. And at all levels of power and society, people should not neglect the situation that was created by special technologies that may make Ukrainian a tool in what is important to the power. And the power wants to enrich itself. So if we don't understand this, where these problems lie, we would only speak about these topics in the context of historic truth. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Kostenko. And Ruban, Mr. Ruban, you wanted to say something. Maybe Iuriy Ivanovich should end the discussion, but this book is really very good, and I hope that it will be translated into English in order all the world to read it, because everyone speaks about us except ourselves. So I think it would be very important if people read this book. And I wish that this book had a great way forward, and I wish you all the best as to the author of this book. And my conclusion, that is altruism, were not estimated, were not assessed by the world, and we should think about it in our further step and understand the sad experience. Thank you very much for your discussion.